What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with a first place Madolche deck profile for the brand new Mavens format. We did have a pretty big tournament at locals today where I did manage to get first place. Yeah, it was like a much larger tournament than we normally had. A lot of people showed up. It was still 5 rounds of Swiss, so it wasn't like a huge amount of people, but yeah, it was definitely a lot on the line. We definitely had about $500-ish in random prize support given out, like packs and whatnot. So yeah, it was quite the nice tournament, and I was able to take first place with Madolche. And a big thing with this deck is I think Madolche are the strongest Madolche have ever been in their lifespan right now. Like, there's so much support it's gotten recently that helps it so much. The problem is there is a much more powerful deck in the room with tier elements, so how do you get Madolche to sort of combat the current meta is sort of my thought process with this build, is how I was gonna build it to counter, you know, the biggest, scariest deck in the room being tier element. Before we hop into this profile, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below along with all of our other social media links. Also, I'm trying to climb the 10K ladder, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content and you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel to keep providing awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content. So without further ado, let's hop into this first place Madolche deck profile. Alright, so I'm going to go through this deck sort of in the engines, because there are several engines in this deck. So starting with the most prominent engine, of course, being the Madolche lineup. It's going to look quite a bit different from like what you're used to when you think of Madolche. So I'm going to start off with, of course, 3 Angeli. She is still 100% the best starter because she just doesn't care about the status of your graveyard, which is fantastic. You really want to start with Angeli, and if you don't, you want to access Angeli through your combo because she puts another name in grave, which can be very, very important for your combo. And by can be, I mean it is very important to make sure you have enough Madolche monsters in your graveyard to do your full combo. To go with our 2 Angeli, we have 2 Pettingcessor, which is quite interesting. This is something you used to always play at 3, but honestly, you just don't need that many Madolche monsters because your weakest hands are the hands where you draw all Madolche. So again, this lineup is going to look very different from normal because these are our 5 1-card starters, I'll call them. I'm not playing any Magdalene, which hurts me a little bit because Magdalene is actually my favorite Madolche monster. But honestly, there's just no way you can play her in this variation of the deck. So our like 5 1-card starters are going to be the 2 Pettingcessor and the 3 Angeli. Next, we have 1 Hoot Cake, which is going to seem very strange because obviously, again, you used to play at least 2 of this. And honestly, Hoot Cake has gotten a big buff with the recent support in Power of the Elements and in Darkwing Blast with the Vernusylphs. Madolche Hoot Cake now with any Vernusylph monster is full combo, just like opening up Pettingcessor or Angeli, but Hoot Cake is something you really don't want to ever open up multiples of, and it's something that doesn't work with many of the engines in your deck. So him being a beast really leads him to not be so, like, it doesn't have as much synergy as the Earth Fairy monsters in your deck do, like Pettingcessor and Angeli. So I do choose to play only 1 Hoot Cake. Next up, we have 2 Messengelato. It's so unfortunate we still have to play 2 of this monster. I tried for the longest time to have a build where you just played 1, and it's just not possible. You unfortunately need 2 of this in so many different situations that even with the Vernusylphs, you're mandated to play 2 of this monster, and he's one of the biggest downsides of the Madolche engine, but he has gotten so much better in the last 6 months, or really I should say about 4 months since Power of the Elements. The Vernusylphs really helped Messengelato a lot because now drawing him isn't near as bad, but again, him being a warrior and not fairy is probably the worst thing about him because he just doesn't work as well with a lot of cards in your deck. Lastly, for Madolche monsters, we of course have the 1 Puddingcess. This is a mandatory thing you have to run because it works with your Pettingcessor because she comes out at level 4, which is fantastic. But more importantly, she is required to be an Xyz material for your Chocolate a la mode, so you are forced to play her. She's just a 1-of that also got a lot better with the Vernusylph, so no super huge complaint there. For Madolche spells and traps, this is where it definitely gets even more different than I would say the monster lineup. I am choosing to only play 1 Chateau and 1 Promenade, so this is quite different from how I would normally play this ratio as well. Normally you would play 1 Chateau, like 1 Salon, and 2 Promenade, which is what I was running for a long time. The issue is that Madolche spells and traps are such bricks, and the way this game plays, or the way this deck plays, is you really want to see monsters and less spells and traps, so drawing Madolche spells and traps was such a huge detriment to my game plan most of the time that I really slimmed down the Madolche package, as you guys can tell. A lot less Madolche monsters and less spells and traps. But honestly, the reason to play this package, or one of the best things about this package, is Chateau. This card is absolutely insane. It won me most of my matches today just because of how much it can actually recycle and how many different engines you have that you can recycle with it. It really is obscene and quite absurd. And Promenade is pretty much one of the another main reason to play Madolche is it gives you an out to go second cards that are like, you know, problems like Lightning Storm, evenly matched. You get around them with Madolche Promenade. It's follow up and it's something else you search off your Messenger Gelato. So Messenger Gelato essentially adds both of these from your deck to your hand. You don't really want to draw them. So these are the only Madolche spells and traps. The only downside to playing one Promenade is it makes you a little weaker to Mystic Mine, but that was something I just had to work around. And I think overall, like, slimming down the Madolche package was definitely an idea I liked, but you can definitely try to play it with more Madolche spells and traps like normal and add Magellans, whatever you want to do with the Madolche package. But this is what I decided worked best in this build. Now on to arguably the best engine in this deck. This engine overperformed today at the tournament where, like, it's been good ever since I've been testing it, but today it truly overperformed. It was quite insane. So we have the Vernusylph package, we have the 3 Duck, and Duck was the best thing out of Darkwing Blast for this deck for sure. This card is phenomenal because, like every Vernusylph you can discard a monster or a Vernusylph card to do an effect, and then you have the option to special summon a Earth monster from your graveyard, but then you're locked into Earth effects for the rest of the turn, and that does come up with one card in your deck that I'll bring up later. But the thing about this Duck is his actual effect is that he adds any Earth Fairy from your deck to your hand. So how we get away with running so many less Madolche monsters is this is essentially Magellan on steroids. It just adds Angeli or Petincessor, and then it's full combo as well. And then you also extend it by special summoning an Earth monster from your grave, which makes these not only insane turn 1, but also insane on your turn 2s and 3s as well. The Vernusylphs are so good, and the Duck is definitely the best one because he is full Madolche combo with just activating his effect, which is super solid. Then to go along with our 3 Duck, we have 3 Hills. Essentially we're maximizing her as well because she searches Duck. Her additional effect is that she adds any Vernusylph card from your deck to your hand. So she can add the Duck, which means, you know, you have her plus like 2 other random discard monsters. You can do full Madolche combo, which is huge. And again, she is a phenomenal extender, like all the Vernusylphs are. And then we have 1 Awakening Forests. This card sends a Earth monster from your deck to the graveyard, which actually comes up for several cards in the deck to essentially give you another really good interruption, while he's also an extender. So we do play 1 of him because he doesn't like start your plays, but he is a Vernusylph you want to run at least 1 of in the deck. And also something that was brought to my attention while I was testing this deck on like Dueling Book is these are kind of like fairies. I mean, they're literally fairies, but they also look like fairies, right? And then you have 1 with like purplish pink hair and 1 with this green hair, sort of. And someone called these Cosmo and Wanda, which I thought was great, and I'm totally taking that. So we have 3 Wanda, 1 Cosmo, so yep, that is the 7-card Vernusylph package. I'm not playing like the Vera or the Trap card. Just keeping it really simple, want to open the best, Vernusylphs possible to make my Madolche engine be better, not really to play with the Vernusylph stuff. Now for the brand new engine that really puts this deck post Mavens, and one of the reasons I think to play this deck and the way it actually competes in the current format is we are playing some Ishizu monsters. We are main decking 3 Mudora, who is absolutely phenomenal in this deck. Something that is pretty easy to note, and you probably have noted already, is the fact that these monsters are Earth Fairies, and a lot of their support work with Earth Fairies, and notably that means Angeli, which is huge. So Mudora, you can discard an Earth Fairy monster to special summon him, and then he can place Gravekeeper's Trap from your deck in the Spell and Trap card zone. And then, most importantly, his Grave effect is the same as Keldo's, who I'll show next. And essentially, they're like a triple DD Crow that shuffles the monsters, or really cards, back into the deck. It can be yours, it can be your opponent's. So when your opponent's Ishizu tier elements, they activate Agido and Kelbeck, and they mill your deck, you can mill this, which is not only like a good card for your engine, but it is a great way to disrupt the, tier element player from going ham, right? Like, he can't activate multiple tier element names in the same chain, and you know, if they only activate one, you still have an out to it as well. It's essentially a free DD Crow that you got from your opponent milling your deck, so you get benefits from your opponent activating mill effects. And also it has crazy synergy as well, this banish effect, because there's a lot of situations where you start with like a Vernusylph, and then you'll have monsters in grave and you can't use Petting Cessor, but you can actually shuffle your own monsters back with the effect of Mudora, and then you can find it to where you have no monsters in grave and you can activate Petting Cessor. So these can make Petting Cessor like live again, which I think is phenomenal. Then we are running 2 Keldo, and we're playing less Keldo than Mudora, even though I wish I could maximize them both at 3, I just don't have the space, and this is a 40 card list that I'd like to keep it there. 2 Keldo instead, because its effect actually isn't as good as Mudora, because we do play the Gravekeeper's Trap, which is super huge, and you'll see why once I explain it. But this has the same second effect where you can sort of banish or really shuffle cards from the graveyards back into the deck. So this is definitely one of the main reasons to play this deck, is the synergy it has naturally and the fact that it's so good in the current format. 1 Kelbeck, I do opt to play one of this because we're on the Gravekeeper's Trap, and this is searchable by a few different cards, like it's searchable through the Duck and the Gravekeeper's Trap, and it's just a really solid hand trap versus tier element. You don't really care if it's milled or sent by a card effect, you're never using its effect to mill really. But it is a phenomenal hand trap that I think is worth playing at 1 because it's just an extra layer of interruption you have. The last card in the Ishizu engine is the 1 Gravekeeper's Trap, which I wasn't playing this in my original build because I thought it did something a little different. I was really just thinking about, you know, the effects it has with Exchange of the Spirit and being like an Abyss Dweller. And then I was also just thinking about the way it calls from the top of your opponent's deck. And those are all great effects. I'm not running Exchange of the Spirit, so that one isn't very relevant. But really the best thing about this is during the main phase, you can discard a card to add an Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. And in most decks, that just adds the Ishizu cards, but in this deck, we can add Angeli or Petting Cessor, you know, if it comes to that. Which essentially means Mudora plus any playable Earth Fairy, say you open Pudding Cess and Mudora, right, or 2 Ishizu cards. Mudora is full combo as long as you're able to place Gravekeeper's Trap in your spell and trap card zone. So we just have a bunch of Madolche starters from so many different engines, which is why I was able to slim down the Madolche package, and that's something I think is quite phenomenal, and some of the real crazy synergy this deck all has with itself. But yeah, Gravekeeper's Trap is a pretty phenomenal card. When you call the draw effect right, it just feels so good, and it's pretty game winning sometimes. At bare minimum, it's giving you knowledge about their hand though. So that's it for the engines. Now into the flex spots, the go second cards, and this is honestly part of like the craziest stuff this deck can do is found in this part of the deck, because it really can play some fantastic cards. So we're going to start with the 3 Pot of Prosperity. This card's obviously impeccable because it can add any starter, or it can add very specific go second cards, and you have a lot of flex spots in your extra deck where this card is very easy to use. You have no draw effects, so that downside will never come up. I will show once I talk about the extra deck what cards I banish off Prosperity. I know a lot of people always ask for that. I will show it at the end of this deck profile, so stay tuned for that if you want to see what I am banishing off Pot of Prosperity. But yeah, this card is absolutely amazing, so if you have access to this card, I definitely recommend playing it. If you don't have access to Pot of Prosperity, you can definitely choose to play more hand traps, or even add the Magellans back in the deck if you'd really like. So those are some more budget options if you don't have Prosperity. Next, we have the 3 Herald of Orange Light, and this card, let me put the good one on top. For some reason, this one looks so much better than my other 2. Orange Light is insane in this deck, right? It has always been amazing with the Ishizu cards. Like, you'll see tier limits playing Orange Light in most lists because it works amazing because they're fairy, and this card's insane. And when you discard something like a Keldo or a Mudora with this card against tier, it feels pretty game winning because you negate an effect, and then you have like a triple DD Crow against them. So that is amazing synergy as well. But of course, you're playing Madolche, so not only can this card discard Vernusylphs, it can also discard some Madolche monsters, which means you have a lot more cards for Orange Light to be live. Now, Orange Light is actually one of the only cards in the deck where a confliction with the Vernusylphs actually come up. If you use a Vernusylph effect, you are locked into Earth monster effects for the rest of the turn. So if you activate the Duck and they don't do anything to it, and you have an Orange Light, you cannot use that for the rest of the turn. And that does come up every now and then, but it's not really a big deal. It rarely comes up. Oftentimes, if you activate something like a Vernusylph, that's what's going to be getting an interruption out of the way. Either their Rule Kalos, their Ash Blossom, their Ghost Bell. Usually the first Vernusylph's getting negated because the Vernusylphs are so powerful because they do 2 things. So oftentimes you're able to Orange Light what's stopping that Vernusylph and you're fine. But Yeah, obviously this card's insane, and in Madolche, this card's always been bonkers, especially because of its synergy with Glass Souffle and Chateau, where you can use the same Orange Light twice in a turn. Definitely want to be playing Orange Light. 3 Effect Veiler, this is like a pretty low impact card, so it might seem weird in the deck, but again, like, it's a really solid go second card versus everything that's not tier, so like Sprite, Fluandereeze, all the decks where this deck is so built to handle Tearlament that if you play against something that isn't Tearlament, a lot of your interruptions actually don't do that much. So Veiler's like a really nice middle ground that hurts every deck right now. And Veiler also shares the same sort of like disgusting synergy with Glass Souffle and Chateau, where like say you have Glass Souffle and Chateau in your on your field, you use 2 Effect Veiler in your hand, and then you're able to use Glass Souffle's effect, send a Madolche monster under her to the graveyard, and then add back 2 Effect Veiler to your hand. So Effect Veiler essentially doubles itself. If you have 2, it can be 4. If you have 1, it's 2 Effect Veilers. Definitely very solid with the Glass Souffle Chateau interaction. 3, Kashatrila Fenrir. Well, I guess Kashtira Fenrir. Gotta get used to his name change. This card is not only just an amazing go second card, right? It's a card that works so amazing with your Vernusylphs because he replaces himself, so it gives you another monster in your hand to activate Vernusylph effects. But also, like, even if your opponent mills Fenrir and you have a Vernusylph, you can just bring him back at any point because he is Earth. Like, he doesn't conflict with your Vernusylph effects being locked into Earth. He works under things like Gozen Match because he's Earth. His synergy in the deck is insane for that reason. So not only is he just a phenomenal card in the current format that helps your go first turns, your go second turns, the synergy he has is phenomenal. He also gives you a lot of outs to any potential floodgates. So Fenrir is bonkers in this deck, and I maximize 3 just because I want to see him, and he works so well with the Vernusylphs. The last go second card in the deck was probably the biggest all day, and it was just phenomenal. It's been great in testing. Super solid main deck option is 3 Sphere Mode. This card is bonkers because obviously you can main deck it. Because of the Vernusylphs, you don't really need your normal summon as much. Because you're able to just Sphere Mode them and then Vernusylph like your Angeli out to the board and essentially do full combo. And this card is beyond fantastic. It just destroys the end boards for tier elements and a lot of Sprite variants as well. So this card was super clutch all day and fantastic because it can be repurposed, right? So even if you go first and you draw this card, you can just discard it with a Vernusylph. So we definitely like Sphere Mode in the main deck. If you don't like the go second package, you can definitely play things like more hand traps. You can definitely go into more of like a D-shifter route for the deck because that's been super popular in Madolche. Obviously, this is trying to play more of like into tiers game almost instead of play shifter, because I feel like if you play shifter and something happens to it or you don't draw it, your deck is inherently worse because you can't play things like Mudora as well, and you can't really play the Vernusylphs as well because they have so little synergy with that card. But it's something you can definitely do, and I think Shifter's still worth it if you want to play it over some of the go second cards I'm running. But yeah, on to the extra deck. That is it for the 40 card main deck. For the extra deck, we have 3 Glass Souffle. This is pretty standard. A lot of your Madolche monsters are the only things you end up going into in your extra deck, so Glass Souffle you end up making the most, so I have decided to maximize her. She's essentially just the best Madolche monster in your extra deck. Not like the highest impact, I'll say, but she's super solid. Like, another reason to play Madolche is the fact that the engine actually lines up into tier elements quite nice because Glass Souffle is pretty good against tier elements, so that's really nice. And of course, she recycles all of your things. You can recycle Vernusylphs, Fenrirs, like your Madolche package, obviously. It really creates like Orange Lights and Veilers, namely. It really creates some really insane game states where you're just so high on advantage and have so many different resources. Then we have 2 Tiramisu. This card's always been one of the most insane rank 4s ever printed. It's one of the most solid go second board clearing options to ever exist in a rank 4. Like up there with Exiton and like Zeus almost, because of the way she does it. She just non-target shuffle things into the deck is so strong, and while she's doing that, she's also recycling resources, so she is pretty nasty, and she's usually how you go for most of your OTKs. Another reason I wanted to play this over something like Naturia is this deck has always had a pretty solid go second, and that's one thing Madolche have over Naturia when you're thinking about which Ishizu deck you want to play, and that's because Tiramisu is just really solid, so definitely playing 2 of her. Then 2 Chocolate a la Mode, which you need for your main combo, and she's a way to like overlay a big monster over something. and then 2 Sistart. I was playing one of this for a while, but there's times where you just need to clear board space. So I'll use a Sistart and a random Madolche monster just to make a second Sistart. So yeah, that comes up sometimes, but often that will not come up. For the random rank 4s, I do have Baguska, Abyss Dweller, and Cowboy. Abyss Dweller's crazy, Baguska's crazy, and I think we all know why Cowboy has to be in here. This format is quite a wild one where games go into time quite often, so having a failsafe like these is pretty solid. You can actually make these a lot more than you used to be able to, even without Magellin plus Salon, and that's because the Vernusylphs are very good at pumping out rank 4s with either the Ishizu package or like the Cosmo and Wanda because they're level 4, so yeah, these are stuff you want to play. Then we have 1 Zeus to round off the Xyz package, which actually came up today in a game that was super important because my opponent had Necro Valley. I was able to Zeus the board away, which was very solid. Then we have 1 Alsa in case they give you like an Ibli. She's pretty huge, but also like it's a good way you can bait the Ishizu cards in graveyard if you need them to be gone so you can use your effects, or to take either a Keldo or Mudora that's still in their graveyard after they've used one, because then you can kind of use it against them. So yeah, 1 Alsa is pretty nice, and then I do have 1 Underworld Goddess just in case an unaffected monster is out and about and I can't sphere mode him, so that's an option as well. What I normally banish off Prosperity, it depends if I feel like I need to go into a rank 4 or not, but if I haven't been Ibli, these definitely go out. I'll usually keep Zeus in a rank 4, so like something like this I'll try to keep unless I absolutely like can't and I need to banish these and keep my Madolches. So I'll usually keep those. I'll banish these 2 unless I know I'm playing against tier, and then 1 Sistart and either a chocolate or a glass souffle. It sort of depends if it's game 1 or 2 and like what I'm sort of feeling, because honestly you can do a lot with very little in this deck. You don't really need as many Madolche monsters as you're playing. So yeah, you don't even have to keep these, but I like to keep at least a Zeus package in, especially if I'm going second. If I'm going first, sometimes I'll choose these instead of the other cards. But yep, that is going to wrap it up for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Tell me what you guys think of Madolche down below, how you're playing it, if you're choosing to run the deck, what differences maybe you would like to see in the deck, or tech choices. Yeah, honestly, I've been having a lot of fun with this deck in testing. I think it's pretty phenomenal. Again, I think this is the best Madolche's ever been. It's just overshadowed by the fact that Tier Element is so much better. But yeah, I think this deck's really solid. You guys, if you try it out, let me know how you like it. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.